non-interpersonal version of a video I did 2 versions of. This will be the 3rd take. Warning to everybody, I'm getting a little tired of this, but I think I need to spell it out. If you're going to misquote or ignore what I say, and misquote or ignore what's in the video, and misquote or ignore the sources, or just ignore the whole thing and just post a comment, this isn't something that gets respected very easily. We do live in a society where this sort of crap is tolerated simply because people claim, I had no time to do that. People act as if they're having a panic attack when they're asked to be normal. I don't think you're having a panic attack. Someone posts on, not this channel necessarily, but someone posted this, so I should cover it. Aren't seatbelt laws an infringement? And on something, and then it goes on. No. This comes from the concept of, I have a right to something by a law that was written as a constitutional amendment or something. You're in a vehicle that wasn't anticipated at the time. The rules have been said, and this has gone through the courts repeatedly, that driving is a privilege. We're talking about driving in a car. Are you required to have a seatbelt on a bus? Are you required to have a seatbelt necessarily off of city roads or county roads or whatever? If you have a road on your own private property and it's not an official road that they have control over, most areas don't have any rules at all what you do. What you do to your ass, your own dumb ass on your own property, Duke Boy style, they don't care about. Next assertion, someone said they found weapons, very vague, across state lines, which direction we're not being told. WAPTEC didn't point that out, so WAPTEC has his own narrative. And this is on a video about Rittenhouse, mostly, I'm assuming. It was under it. Rittenhouse is charged currently with possession of a dangerous weapon unlawfully at this point. It's considered a misdemeanor or something. Minor compared to the actual shootings that are still being investigated to determine what, if anything, they can determine. Not with transport across state lines, very tellingly, or possession of a stolen or illegal weapon. That last part is a hint. Let's ignore the situation again. He was in a state that he was not normally in. I mean, not born in or not living in. But he was in another state. We can go from one state to another. Okay. The gun he used on the night he did that shooting was borrowed from someone in the state. For what you're implying here, and you're avoiding saying this, is that right after a shooting where he held up his hands and acted like he's either please don't shoot me, or acting like he was turning himself into the police, which is actually the assertion that's been assumed by most people. He didn't return the gun to the person he borrowed it from, so he must have taken it across state lines and committed theft. Neither of these charges have been leveled against him. What actually happened, and what are you referring to? The local police in his home near Chicago, the police showed up, and the people in the building turned over 2 weapons, specifically a Smith & Wesson M&P 15, 2 of them, that were at the time asserted by the police after checking quickly that they had been legally purchased. Now, what's the easiest answer here? They were purchased in that state and had nothing to do with the shooting? Okay, let's continue. These 2 rifles were then given to the police department in Antioch after by the family. Then it was given to the investigators in the state where the shooting happened, to the Kenosha Police Department, so that they can do the following. They are saying they're trying to figure out, investigate when these guns were purchased, where they were purchased, by whom these were purchased by, and whether or not they had anything to do with the shooting, because they haven't revealed whether or not one or both of the rifles, or either of them, were even involved in anything across the state line. Now remember, they were retrieved at his house, and the people there said that they were able to quickly determine that they had been legally purchased, which implies that they were purchased in that state. For you to be completely correct about this, very vague, and oddly enough saying they found weapons, I mean, he could have been a billy club, what are you talking about? And you didn't even state which state it was in. The assertion that nobody seems to be contradicting is that he borrowed guns from somebody who was there. Now, why would a person do that? If you're not aware of this, you're told dead ass. Unless you know the law, unless you're a lawyer, unless you're an old hat at this, never take a gun across a county line, much less a state line, or into a town. If you enter Portland, Oregon, they may be friendly about it, but they can just go ahead and arrest you for no good reason. So what you do is what's called best practices, or practicing discretion. There's two versions of the word discretion here. Look up the one I'm pointing at in the description that a lot of you are going to ignore. This will bleed over into another subject. And also the guns that they got from his house, they're trying to determine if they were fired. And also if they were fired in the state this happened in, and by him at all. Meanwhile, you'd have to go with the following presumption, which is a big ask, which is not being said, but it's implied. In order for your assertion that it was weapons were found across the state line, and this should be a significant thing that I'm apparently doing a narrative about, you're implying that he walked a couple of guns across the state line he borrowed from someone, which would dead-ass be something that he was trying to avoid by not bringing his own guns across at all. Again, this is a person who's prudent enough, at 17, dare I say almost smart enough, not to bring a gun across the state line unless absolutely necessary, unless you know exactly what you're doing. You're on a YouTube channel where I'm discussing with people why you can get into legal trouble for making a PUBG fucking flare gun because of all the twisted up, fucked up rules that the ATF has. If you make one from Call of Duty or Team Fortress, you make a Pyro's gun, which is a 1-inch bore and it's metal, it's not illegal. If you make anything near a 12 gauge or any other kind of gauge, unless it's below 50 caliber, it is illegal. Don't make a flare gun unless you know what you're doing. There are so many laws that contradict each other and create problems that this whole thing may actually cause a precedent to be set in the state or maybe in the country as to whether or not conflicting laws that accidentally do so should be considered null. This is a problem the prosecutors and defense are having because they don't know where the hell to go with this. But by all means, deliberately tease the idea that he walked guns across after borrowing them, which doesn't make any sense because he avoided even bringing his own into the state. I think he brought over a medical kit because there's no rules on that. And I guarantee if you ask him, is it legal for you to transport a flare gun across state lines? Depending on where you are, you don't know that answer. I'm going to tell you dead ass, he may not have been able to legally do that except for special considerations. I know what they are because I had to look this shit up. Don't follow my example. You're too entertaining. Let's move on. Yes, you're an idiot. Now, if I'm being ambiguous, I'm not. I'm not teasing you. Bitch. Next. Read the description below for valor and discretion and looking shit up. Anyway, let's go on. Also read the quote from Sun Tzu. Here we go. Changing the topic. Just so you know, I'm not doing this based on political agenda. There's no such thing these days, but I'll believe you for a minute. What about the doctrine of self-defense, freedom of assembly, and freedom of speech, or free speech? It's the freedom of speech. Yeah. Do you feel that you have the freedom to be in public place in which others are gathered, even if you have a message to share that differs with that group? There's a specific condition I'm going to bring up here that has nothing to do with guns or belief systems. But I'm going to explain something to you. BLM and a group we like to call Antifa, even though that isn't really Antifa, and Patriot Prayer, and every other group you're going to invoke are a minority population or subculture, with the majority of us not wanting to be involved in this because they don't want our towns burned down. And honestly, if you're not aware of this, before this year, and actually maybe even after, most people are quite comfortable with the world as it is because it's good enough. That's not an insulting or horrible thing to say. The majority of people were complacent about things because they weren't miserable. Making them miserable, both sides doing it, just makes both sides look like a tiny subculture that's really loud, like on the internet. That doesn't matter. The majority of people in this country were not looking for this kind of an argument. So they're both groups that are intruding on the majority, everybody who wasn't at these fucking assault and battery parties. But he said in-group here. You're acknowledging that these are subcultures. You may be part of one. I may be as well. Let's see. What if your presence there is detested and your message is detested? Do the above conditions curtail your legal freedom to express yourself? No. But discretion tells me that getting hit in the head with a baseball bat isn't something I want to encourage, and if I can avoid it, I will. I'm not in Portland right now. I'm not going to fight some stupid war between two groups of people that aren't welcome in the city. And it should also be pointed out by a mayor yelling what they did about certain intruders and certain other intruders not being mentioned, namely militia and also the BLM. They were stating that neither of these groups are welcome. Next. What if your presence at such location is causing anxiety to those who are present? Perhaps they are not able to comfortably engage in particular activities while you're there. I've also been a bouncer at a bar that didn't say it was a gay bar or anything, and I was also told to leave because I was acting too straight once. No, there isn't a gay agenda. It's just that there were a small group of people in a fairly small club that got loud and wanted to have their own ladies' night and also wanted to have their gay ladies' night and wanted to have a men's night and gay men's night and wanted us all separate but equal. And I explained to them, separate but equal has been tried before. Didn't work. I'm not in favor of BLM. I'm not, except for Bureau of Land Management. I'm not in favor of them either. I'm not in favor of Antifa. I'm not in favor of the Patriot Prayer people ever showing up in any town I've had. Why? Because there was a fucking war started in the town that I'm normally living in. I left there because of COVID-19 and all the lockdown rules. I'm not going back because of the fact that the place is being burned down by a bunch of idiot factions that won't stop doing it. You've got a culture war because you want to have one. Any of you that are involved in this. All the SJWs and people yelling, white people need to burn in hell, as well as the others who scream the exact opposite that I'm not allowed to say because YouTube is only sensitive to one area sometimes. Depends on which way the wind blows. Do these conditions curtail your legal right to be there? What about bad actors that would wholly commit to removing you from the location? Does this condition curtail your right to be there? What if there is a prevailing consensus among most of the people in the group, this is a subgroup, that violence against you is appropriate should they stay where you are not wanted? And there are TERFs, trans exclusionary radical feminists, that I don't agree with either because they talk about excluding people. I'm inclusive, not exclusive. And if an area was that toxic, I don't go into it. Yes, I used an SJW term. If you're not aware of the whole purpose of the title of the video, discretion is the better part of valor. Showing great courage in the face of danger, especially in battle, is valorous. Thinking carefully and exercising caution before taking action and avoiding unnecessary risk or creating added problems is discretion, and also mature. Can you break the opponent's resistance or attack without attacking them? Cleverness does not damage or demand, a long delay, nor does it necessarily reduce the delay. You might get more reactions if you don't take action. The hardest part of understanding when you own a gun is to know that if you're not aware of this, your purpose, your overdriving reason for having a gun, especially if you're walking around with it, is to find every excuse not to fire it. And if this isn't a first principle that you understand, you will not pass a training class, and you will not get your certificate you might need in your city if I'm teaching it. If you have not matured to the point that you know that you should avoid at all costs ever having to shoot anybody, you're a moron. The reason I have a problem with Rittenhouse, or whatever his name is, Milhouse, is he entered a situation where a gun may or may not have been needed, but it would have been the overdriving need of a person who was trained properly not to bother bringing it. I have been shot, lit on fire, hit in the head, had a lot of damage in my life. I've avoided all confrontation if I can help it. That doesn't make me a coward. It means that I'm trying not to have a war when I'm not being paid to do it. And there's no benefit. None of this gives anybody anything. Any reasonable person would have reason to believe it would cause immediate severe harm or death. True. Do you walk into hell? What is your benefit? Would you have legal justification to use lethal force? Having legal justification doesn't change whether it's right or wrong. The law isn't right or wrong. It's what we've come up with as best we can as a judgmental method and a process and a system. I don't know whether this kid is guilty of anything anymore. because we have enough information, sadly, that we can't jump to conclusions.